For centuries, trade wars have shaped the world. Some say they protect jobs and industries, others say they wreck economies. But the truth, well, it's kind of complicated. From the Great Depression to the US-China tech war, history has shown us that tariffs can help, and they can hurt. So let's break it down. Who wins, who loses, and what it means for the future of America. Let's go back to 1930. The US was in crisis, the economy was tanking. So Congress did what politicians always do. They try to fix it. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act raised taxes on over 20,000 imported goods to protect American businesses. Sounds smart, right? Oh, wrong. Other countries struck back with their own tariffs. US exports collapsed by 61%, world trade shrank by 66%, and unemployment skyrocketed. The whole plan backfired. It made the Great Depression even worse. And the worst part, the politicians who pushed it lost their jobs in the next election. Fast forward to the 1980s, this time the enemy wasn't the economy, it was Japan. Japanese cars and electronics were dominating the US market. People in Washington freaked the fuck out, thinking America was losing its edge. Reagan's solution? He forced Japan to limit their car exports. Japanese automakers actually agreed to it, to send fewer cars to America. But here's the twist. Since they were selling fewer cars, they just raised the prices and made even more profit. Then they started building factories in the US to dodge the restrictions altogether. Tariffs beaten at their own game. And then came the biggest trade war of our time, the US versus China. In 2018, President Trump went all in, slapping tariffs on $500 billion worth of Chinese goods. His goal? Stop China from cheating in trade, force them to buy more American products, and bring back manufacturing jobs. China hit back with one of the hardest hit industries, American farmers. China was the biggest buyer of US soybeans until they weren't. US exports to China dropped 63% in 2018. American farmers were left with piles of crops they couldn't sell. The US government had to bail them out with $28 billion in aid, paid for by American taxpayers. And it wasn't just farmers. American companies that relied on Chinese parts, tech, retail, autos, saw their costs skyrocket. Tariffs are basically a tax, but who actually pays them? You do. Studies showed that the trade war cost the average American household $1,300 per year in higher prices. So did the trade war work? Kind of. It forced China to make some trade promises, but they didn't fully follow through. And in the end, many of the tariffs stayed in place long after Trump left office. Alright, but let's be fair, not all tariffs are failures. Let's talk about something almost no one knows, the Trump steel tariffs. In 2018, Trump put a 25% tariff on imported steel and 10% on aluminum. Critics said it would kill jobs, but guess what? US steel production actually went up. Thousands of jobs were added and wages in the industry increased. Some factories that were on the brink of shutting down, they stayed open. So here's an example where tariffs actually worked. They gave American companies a chance to compete. But there was still a trade-off. Steel prices also went up, which hurt industries that rely on cheap steel, like car manufacturers. Then there's the semiconductor battle, arguably the most important trade war in the world today. China has been pouring billions into dominating cheap production. So US fought back, not with tariffs, but with the CHIPS Act. Massive $52 billion investment into bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to America. Intel, TSMC, Samsung, well, they're all building billion-dollar factories here in America now. This isn't just about jobs, it's about national security. The US doesn't want to rely on China for the tech that powers everything from smartphones to missiles. So do tariffs help or hurt? The answer is both. If you're a steelworker in Ohio, tariffs saved your job. If you're a farmer in Iowa, tariffs might have wiped out your biggest customer. If you work in tech, the semiconductor war could be securing America's future. What we do know is that trade wars are messy. They rarely go as planned, but they do shape the future. And as the world becomes more divided, those battles will only get bigger. The real question is, who's prepared to win? What do you think? Are tariffs a necessary weapon or a ticking time bomb? Let's talk in the comments.